Alright, in this video I'm going to attempt to review the New Mutants movie that just came out. The first thing I want to bring up, first of all, yeah, I'm no professional in this kind of sense. I'm just hopefully sharing this with like-minded video viewers and seeing what you think. I started reading the New Mutants back in like 1991 when I first got into comics. I was trying to figure out everything that was going on with them, with Marvel, DC. And the New Mutants were always those kind of like the not cool X-Men. They were like they were the first X title that got its spin-off series back around 1982, which is a big deal because now we've got like I don't know how many spin-offs. Since the 90s there's been like 4 or 5 at a time. Same with Batman, Superman, stuff like that. But to me it's important that they were that first attempt for Marvel to be like, maybe we could get some more out of the audience on this. And I think this movie, before I get into it, and there will be spoilers, I'm gonna ruin the whole thing for you guys. I think the movie did a good job of representing exactly what the New Mutants were in comics, or are, because if you're looking for like a Dark Phoenix, X-Men fighting someone like Magneto or Apocalypse to save the world, this is not going to be the story for you. And it's what the New Mutants never really were that. They were always just more about some teenagers getting through life, in my opinion. And they had their struggles, but they didn't have the same level of like flair that the X-Men got. And I always kind of got irritated because it's like, all it takes is the writer to give them, like, I'm sure it's the editor was like, oh, we can't have them fighting the big threats because that's for the X-Men or Avengers or whatever. But if you gave them enough attempts, I feel like maybe popularity would have generated better. If you don't know, the New Mutants actually did develop some people in their last year in the early 90s. Their title is responsible for Deadpool, Cable, Domino, a lot of like latecomers that are big names now. But anyway, I'm also going to sell on how this title, which Chris Claremont created, which is the guy that made the X-Men cool, they were ahead of its time with the whole diversity, inclusion thing, because they had, alright, now she's not in the movie, but there was a Vietnamese character, female, named Karma, she was a telepath, basically, and could control people. You also had Danny Moonstar, that was a Cheyenne Native American, and she could make people's worst fears or whatever seem real or even become real. Cannonball could project himself. He was a white boy, Kentucky born, raised in the coal mines, and he could project himself with a force field, becoming a living cannonball at high speeds, of course. You had Roberto de Custo, that was Sunspot, and he absorbed solar energy and could make himself stronger and possibly tougher and more invulnerable. And then in later years could actually make himself fly. You actually see his character in Days of Future Past, the X-Men movie, briefly. And there's Wolfsbane, who's a Scottish, strong Catholic raised young woman that can turn into kind of a wolf in a hybrid werewolf type of form. And she's raised in an environment where she's taught that she's the devil, like a demon, a witch, stuff like that, and she's abused physically because of it by her strict Catholic mentors, the priests around her. You also have, like, she comes up in later comics, is Yana Rasputin, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. That's Colossus's younger daughter, or sister, I'm sorry. She's also known by the name Magic, and she can teleport, and she's got this magical sword and this metal arm, and she was sort of raised in hell. They call it limbo, but I think many of us would agree it was pretty much hell. She's tortured there and learns like the dark arts and becomes like the ruler. But then she comes over and she's a new mutant and she's struggling with her dark history and all that stuff. It concludes around issue 75 if you're looking to read that on the old New Mutants, which is the Fall of the Mutants storyline, which was a good one. But I just gave you a little rundown of all the characters involved because that's going to come into later with my review. Um, in my opinion, the movie was very accurate. It's not in the sense that, as far as I know, there's no storyline where they're all brought together in a hospital and taught. They're not even really taught to use their powers. They're just like, it's kind of weird. If you're looking for one of these X-Men movies where they got to fight a big villain like Apocalypse or Magneto, or deal with something like Dark Phoenix, save the world, this is not gonna do it for you. This is gonna disappoint you so much because this movie is set entirely in that hospital and it's the grounds around it. They they don't really deal with anything other than themselves. But that's completely fine. That's what this story should be about. The problem is the bar has been raised so far since the first X-Men movie came out that people are going to want to see something bigger than that, and that's not what's going to happen. But the writers, directors, and actors did a good job, and yeah, special effects were great. This They did so good, and they're going to be unappreciated for it. What happens in this movie? All right, there's this woman, Dr. Reyes, which I am familiar with this character. She was introduced in the early '90s as an X-Man. She could create force fields. Now in this movie, there's none of that. Her being good, she's just a puppet for the Essex Company, which is Mr. Sinister, which we may never ever even see now that Disney owns it all. Um, but she's in there trying to act like she's teaching these kids. She's really training them to be killers, doing psych evaluations. She can make force fields. Her force fields keep them from leaving the property. I'm not sure how that works while she's asleep, but whatever. Um, but I like the fact that I'm like, as a fan, I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, well, I know who that character is. Once they said her last name, I'm thinking force fields, and sure enough, she can do it. Um, the movie opens up with Danny Moonstar on the Cheyenne Reservation or property, I assume. And she's with her dad, and they're being chased by this bear. It starts snowing before that, and her dad gets killed. You can clearly see he gets clawed by some large animal. And then she wakes up in this hospital, and this woman's telling her how she's there to help them and all this crap. But then she learns the rest of the cast, and the rest of the cast looks like they should. They all have the backstory that I already went into. So I'm already like, yeah, this is cool. Like this matches up with everything. But then as like the whole, I guess you could say, crux of the story are the kids figuring out who each other are, basically getting to know each other, and figuring out that Danny Moonstar, is creating these mirages. That's her code name in the old days. Later, they just started calling her Moonstar, but she doesn't know she's making these mirages, and they don't know who's doing it. They're like having these real life bad nightmares, and like it's I don't know. I thought it was really well done, and as that's going on, eventually the Essex Company determines that Moonstar is too dangerous, so she has to be put down. So Dr. Reyes is going to plan to put her down, but at that point, all the other mutants bond and they unite against this opportunity. And during the course of this, Wolfsbane and Mirage develop a romantic interest. This didn't bother me. I think some people might be bothered by it. If I recall correctly, they always had a pretty strong bond because of the Wolfsbane can turn into a wolf, and Mirage being like Native American has some kind of connection to that, or maybe it's her telepathy-based abilities. But in any case, it almost seemed like maybe if Claremont, the writer, could have gone with it back then, he would have. I know there's been some kind of weird romantic drama with Wolfsbane and Mirage and men, but it's never been really developed. It's almost been more manipulation based. Like Wolfsbane was brainwashed in the Genoshan stories to like Havoc from X Factor and X Men, but that's a whole other story. And Moonstar sort of liked Cannonball, but it never worked out, which actually, if anything, confirmed more likely that maybe she wasn't interested in men. But I don't necessarily know the characters well enough to say they were or were not interested in opposite sex. Wolfsbane did experiment with some guys for a little while in the early 90s, like this guy Richter and Doug Ramsey before that, but it didn't break it for me. But yeah, so they get in this situation where Moonstar's going to get put to sleep by Dr. Reyes, and all the New Mutants unite, and this demon bear comes up, and it's just an illusion, but it can kill you. And the thing that makes it anticlimactic is it doesn't matter if they have all the heavy hitters hitting it. It's not going to stop until Mirage is dead. So it doesn't even matter if Wolverine and the Dark Phoenix or whatever hit it with whatever. Like, as long as Mirage is breathing, it's still there. It might act like it is. It's like kind of like fighting Freddy Krueger. But what was cool was like Wolfsbane's talking to Mirage as she's like in this almost comatose, I don't know if I'm saying that right, state. And eventually Mirage wakes up knowing she's got to deal with it. And the big overall, the movie starts and ends with her saying how her father raised her with this concept about the bear, and it's like your soul. And there's the good bear, which is all the good qualities of a person, and the bad bear, which are all the negative qualities of a person. And the whole idea is, as long as you nurture the right side of the bear, that bear will become stronger than the other bear. So this bear that they're all fighting, that's killed her tribe and her people, and it's killing her friend, it's attacking her friends. It's up to her personally to overcome her own fears and nurture her inner self, basically her good bear. And I thought that was really cool, and I believe that's the old story from the early 80s, which as a kid might have been quite a bit over my head. Like, I mean, it's kind of deep stuff. So I think it's a really impressive story. What's just going to hurt it for people is that it's not like they saved the world or anything. It's just all they did was deal with their own issues, which is probably not enough for many comic book movie goers. Other notes about the movie that were really cool is if you know about Lockheed, the purple dragon that Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat, had in the comics, that dragon's in this. It's mostly a puppet that Magic carries around with her, but by the end of it, when she really cuts loose, you see Lockheed in the full dragon mode. I mean, still little, but it's still very fun. Magic was a lot of fun. It seemed like, obviously they showed enough of her that we want more. But with Disney and all this, I don't think we're going to get to see more. But that's pretty much all I had to say. I think if you're an avid New Mutants fan, reader, if you've read those stories, you'll appreciate it. But if you're one of these, need a lot of action and saving the world sort of stuff, this movie is going to disappoint you, and you're going to say it's trash. No wonder that it got pushed back. But in my opinion, the writer, directors, and actors have done the best job to date of making an X-Men story come to life on the big screen. The setting's a little different, but even in the comics, like they were initially brought together by the Hellfire Club to basically become the Hellions, which are like the bad X-Men. So in that sense, they did the best with what they could, and like I said, I thought it was very accurate and well done. I just think it's going to get trashed, more so than it's already getting trashed. But hopefully some of you agree, or this helps you. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.